Mark Carney has had his first critical test as Prime Minister, meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump in Washington. And today he met with Canada's premiers to discuss this country's next steps. And joining me to discuss all of this and more is Conservative strategist and co-founder of the Oyster Group, Amanda Galbraith, and Shanice Scott, a Liberal strategist and senior account director at Hill & Knowlton. Thank you for joining me. Now, let's start with Carney in the Oval Office yesterday. I thought he took a very conciliatory but somewhat firm tone with Donald Trump, but you could see every now and then the muscles in his face were tightening when Trump said something rather unpalatable. I'll start with you, Amanda. How do you rate how Carney did? Did he do what needed to be accomplished?
I think he was very effective within reason. I mean, obviously...
Coming from a conservative...
No, I've been very open about my post-partisan, post-campaign self is very direct. He did very well on Friday with his opening press conference. I thought it was very measured, reasonable, kind of the opposite of what Prime Minister Trudeau was like. And then I think, again, it was high stakes in that room. He only spoke for about 3.5 minutes of the total of almost 40 minutes. But when he made interjections, they were reasonable. I thought his line in particular around, some things are not for sale, including the White House, really took the air out of it. Yeah, if I could say one criticism, and I know it's difficult, is that occasionally you could read on his face when he was either or when he was about to interject. But I think, again, playing to a home audience, that actually went well. And because he seems to have such a good relationship with President Trump, he got away with it in a way that maybe some other leaders wouldn't have.
Definitely. Okay. Interesting points. Now, he's definitely not Justin Trudeau, and Trump even referenced that. He did not like Trudeau. Do you think that this is setting the stage for a better relationship with Canada, and will that help us in tariff negotiations, Shanice?
I think we're definitely off to a much better start. It's clear that Prime Minister Carney has been briefed in a certain way. He can speak to Donald Trump. You brought up the real estate comment. He's using things that kind of align with President Trump. I think they both don't see themselves as career politicians, which they are not. There is some alignment. Some of the things I think that President Trump has been critical on Prime Minister Trudeau, he is not that way with Carney. He sees and respects him, which I think...
Respect is a good word. I felt that there was more respect in that room. Now, sorry to cut you off, but let's switch now to Carney's other major challenge, one of many, of course, but that's within this country. And we have to start listening to Alberta more carefully, Amanda. Danielle Smith has just raised the stakes and lowered the bar for a referendum on separation.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised, actually, because if you look at the tactics that Quebec has played over the last decades, but in particular underneath the Trudeau Liberals, right? They raise the specter of separation, they threaten things, and all of a sudden they put their hand out and they get money, right? The West has been watching this happen over and over and over again.
And they're angry because the Conservatives didn't win the election. So are they playing politics or are they serious?
I think it's both. I think they're using the political tools at their disposal. I think the Premier of Alberta is arming herself with the ways that she can, including a potential referendum to saber rattle. But at the end of the day, they are rightly frustrated about the economic contribution they make to the country and the fact that they feel it's unfair. There's been a lack of attention to that part of the country, including around blocking pipelines. You can say they bought a pipeline, but at the end of the day, if you didn't have blockades in private sector, that wouldn't have had to happen. So I think it's a really tough stage for Prime Minister Carney, but I think there's also perhaps some alignment with the Conservatives around these issues that they might actually be able to make some progress on.
Shanice, what does Carney have to do to appease Alberta?
I think it's important to remember that, he is an Albertan, right? So I think you laugh. But
I do. He hasn't been in the country for a decade.
You can say what you want to say. I mean, I'm not going to take out the fact that he is born there. There are ties there. And I think Carney is going to, what we didn't see with the Trudeau Liberals, is going to make an effort. You can see that with the type of platform he put forward. We're talking about energy superpower. We're talking about getting our resources out there. That is not a conversation the Liberals were having prior to this. There is a different tone, and I think Alberta is going to be a big piece of that. We just need to keep the unity going. We do still have a Donald Trump, effect there that we need to make sure that we are a united front to then have this unified market, that we can go out there and show Donald Trump that we are serious and that we are taking our sovereignty seriously. But there is going to be a world in where Alberta has to come to the table. I'm not saying that there isn't issues there, and there have been issues there, and I think a lot of that is around what we've been doing with energy and kind of getting us back to being a resource-first country. But I think the Prime Minister is taking that seriously, and I think you could see that tone shift. Trudeau wouldn't have had the conversation about pipelines. Trudeau wouldn't have really had the conversation around the carbon tax. Carney is willing to have those conversations. Carney is willing to take that and make actually good on those promises.
Do you think a Liberal Prime Minister can win over Alberta?
No, I don't. And I actually don't think
Ever?
this one can either. To
No?
me, I don't care
Regardless of what he does?
I mean, listen, if he can swallow himself whole as he's done on the carbon tax, which he's campaigned for decades, and all of a sudden has found Jesus in repealing it, he can. I also think he's talked about a clean energy superpower. He hasn't said energy. He drops that when it's convenient. But that, to me, is going to be very interesting because Mark Carney, the Prime Minister, has a very clear record on how he's treated the resource economy. In fact, to become a sufficient booming, we need to oil, we need at LNG, things that the Prime Minister Trudeau said, there's no market for that, I'm not interested.
But don't you think there's a shift in what has happened because of our friends to the south, that there's kind of a awakening across Canada, and we can see that? There is kind of this alignment across with premiers and with different political parties.
Not with Danielle Smith so much.
I think there's been a shift for sure, and I think the Liberal Party has run to that for voters. But do I think that Mark Carney is going to put a pipeline nationally through Quebec? No, I don't, because he'll lose votes there at the end of the day, and I don't think he will do it. I think he's probably got the support for the Conservatives to make it happen, but I actually don't think at the end of the day he's going to risk those Liberal votes, especially because his vote coalition is so center-left. Where do those NDP progressives go? They're
What's
not
the
gonna be happy about
alternative
it.
then?
We have a national unity crisis at the hands of the Liberal Party, who has fostered it for the last decade.
Interesting. I hate to say it, but on that note, we have to stop.
Say.
I wanted to get into Pierre Poilievre and getting a seat, and 10 seconds from each of you, perhaps. Should he hold that seat? Should he win in that by-election? Should he be allowed to stay on, be an MP? I mean, he lost fair and square in his riding.
And running in one of the safest seats in the country. I mean, it is what it is. He had that comment about not having a seat in the House and not governing from outside, but he didn't win. His constituents turned him down after 20 years. I think it's, sure, run, get at the safest seat. It seems a little interesting and funny to me, but they've got to do something, and they got to be prepared, I guess, for what's coming.
I'll give you the last word very quickly, Amanda.
I have no. He's got to run for a seat. He's going to do so. Leaders that don't have their seats have run for things all the time. I think it's perfectly appropriate. He'll be back in the Parliament. I actually think it's good on the Prime Minister to have that by-election called soon.
I thought that was a classy thing to do.
It was very classy. It's appropriate, and they'll face off in Parliament. I think that's the right thing to do.
Okay. On that note, thank you both very, very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.